long time no see. Welcome back to the Sanditon Chronicles. I'm your host, Maureen. And for the second time today, hence same outfit, same makeup, same stuff. Something's different though. Let me know after you've listened to this, of course, what's different about our podcasting room. So we are going to kind of pick up where we left off. And we are going to talk about Edward and Clara. Now, I have made my opinions on Clara very well known. First of all, super happy that Lily is coming back to reprise her role as Clara Brereton. And obviously, who can't be happy about Jack Fox returning? I do hope, however, that Jack Fox is going to find some redemption in seasons 2 and 3, because the more I thought about it, and we talked about this in the Esther Edward episode, the more I thought about it, the more you could not excuse his behavior, because I like him when he's on screen. He makes me laugh because that's Jack Fox and putting himself into this character, playing the lovable cad. But he's not a lovable cad. He is a narcissistic abuser. And I wasn't prepared for that thought to come into my head so fully when I did the Esther Edward episode. But the more I thought about it, the more it couldn't be escaped. That is what he is. No matter how you spin it. Yes, lovable cad. And yeah, that's kind of like, how they branded him and how Jane Austen probably would have branded him. But I don't think she would have thought in depth about what he is. Like Wickham. I'm sure Wickham would have just been seen as like a lovable villain, whatever, kind of his personality. He's charismatic. And, man, my words are coming out weird. He's charismatic. And so there is that aspect to him. But there is also a very sinister edge to Edward and to Wickham. Same thing, right? So I don't think they were far off in how they depicted Edward based off of how Jane Austen has written her villains, right? Because Wickham, pretty terrible dude. He took a underage girl away from her home to elope with no intention of eloping and then had sex with her for days in London for who knows how long. So super not okay guy. Jane Austen wrote him. Edward, same sort of thing with Clara, only not actually going all the way. So I think that they did a good job in interpreting how Jane Austen would have finished out this villainous character, because I don't think Clara is the villain here. I think Edward is the villain of this piece. And a little bit Eliza. Because I think she's a terrible human being. But she's not a villain in the same level that Edward is. So, Edward and Clara. Clara, I understand Clara. I don't think she's a villain. And I've had people who completely, vehemently disagree with me about Clara being the villain. Vehemently disagree with me. But here's the thing. I think that as we learn more about Clara, we learn that she was sexually abused for years by a family member, by an adult family member, by an adult male family member. And much today, though not as commonly expected, men, especially back then, were the protectors of the family, right? It was your father is the one who needed to give permission for you to do anything. Your father is the one who made the decisions for your family. Your father is the one who protected you. If your father was not around, it went to the oldest brother. If there wasn't a brother, then it went to the nearest male relative, right? So the men were supposed to protect the women in their family. And yet here's this uncle who sexually assaulted her for who knows how long. That scene where she's talking to Esther is so heartbreaking. When she says, how does she word it? I want to get it right, because I think it's a really pivotal part to understanding exactly who Clara is and why she is the way she is. Where she says, it happened to me too, only with me it was an uncle. Something along those lines. But even in episode 1, when they're at the ball, of course, we see Clara as Charlotte meets her, right? That's the first time we see her in episode 1. And then we see her kind of very eagle-eyed watching Edward interact with Charlotte, almost like a little jealously. And then she brings up to Charlotte even her connection to Edward. She's like, well, the Lord Denham has been extolling its virtues to me about the baiting machines. So I think, though, that what her hope was, I think he was her backup plan. I don't think she actually really loved him. I don't think Clara really had the capacity to love yet. I think she will. But I think right now, Clara's entire emotional state, her entire mental state, is merely surviving. That's all it is. It's just, what do I need to do to survive the situation? What do I need to do to survive these people? What do I need to do to ensure I never have to go back to the absolutely abusive depravity that I came from? Claire's a survivor. And she has been taught through her terrible circumstances growing up that you need to do whatever it takes. You need to sacrifice your virtue. You need to sacrifice your ability to love people. You need to sacrifice all of that in order to just barely survive. Because what she was doing wasn't really living. It was just, she always had to think of the next, I don't want to say scam, because I don't think she's really a scammer, but she had to see the next strategy. She always had to be looking forward in case something fell back through. And I think that's what Edward was for her. He was a backup plan. If I can get Edward to either be disinherited by Lady Denham, or if I can get Edward to want to be with me, then either if he gets disinherited, I have a better chance of getting the money. If he wants to be with me and he's not disinherited, then I can get the money when I marry him, is kind of, I think, where her headspace was. So I think that's why she was trying to kind of cement that relationship to Charlotte when they first meet, because I think she's trying to signify, hands off, Edward and I talk. Edward wants me to do this, and that's kind of how I viewed it. And maybe you don't agree with me, and that's totally fine. Good writing doesn't always have just one interpretation, so that's totally fine if you don't agree with me. But that's the way that I saw that. And you see, obviously, that time in the woods, which is, I fast forward through that scene all the time. But it's Edward and Clara out in the woods, and she is doing things to him that you shouldn't do. Especially as someone, it's not your husband, and you're not their wife. But as Edward puts it, she took him in hand. Okay, that's as far as, and that makes me real uncomfortable to say. Anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up at all is because in the ball scene in episode 1, when she's talking to Charlotte, and they know that they were seen by Charlotte. I mean, Charlotte didn't do an excellent job of hiding herself. She waited until they saw her and then hid. So, I mean, everybody knows, right? Charlotte saw him. Clara knows, Edward knows, Charlotte knows. It's just a very uncomfortable situation. But when Clara's talking with her, I don't think she's lying. I think she is trying to get to Charlotte first so that Charlotte will be more sympathetic to her plight as opposed to whatever lie Edward might say. And of course, maybe she embellished, but I don't think she's lying when she said, I was forced to do something that I did not want to do so that I could avoid doing something even worse. And of course Charlotte's confused because she's very naive and she's never done any of that, and she's never been exposed to that kind of depravity, that kind of wickedness. She's never been exposed to it. Clara, unfortunately, that has been her life. She has been subjected to be an object of sexual nature to men who are her family, to probably, I mean, you imagine that if her uncle was that depraved, if her uncle just didn't care and sexually assaulted her and abused her on a regular basis, how many other men has that happened to her with? And how many other men did she try to do what she did with Edward just because the men were giving her promises of, I'll take you away from here, but I have to be sure you're going to be with me. And so she would probably sacrifice her virtue to men who gave her empty promises because they knew that they could get her to do those things. So you have to imagine that this is not the first time she's done something like this. I mean, obviously she knew what she was doing. And that's really sad. Because women in that time period, much like Charlotte, were supposed to be more in the dark, right? If you worked in a brothel, obviously you weren't. If you knew a madam, obviously you weren't. If you knew a really forward, eccentric married woman, you weren't. Who, would maybe confess some of their activities. But typically, young unmarried women did not know about these things. Or at least it wasn't proper to know about these things. So if they did know, they didn't tell anybody about it. But Clara had said that line, and I think that this is also, there are two key things that I think really define Clara, well, actually three things that really define who Clara is for me. And one is where she says, I was forced to do something I didn't want to do to avoid doing something much worse. And the reason I say that she's not lying there, she's not, maybe she did enjoy it, who knows, maybe she did, I don't know. Judging on her relationship with Edward, how contentious it is, I would guess not. I would guess that this was an opportunity to say, well, I didn't know anything. He took advantage of me and told me to do this. I think that there's always a fallback. There's always a plan B with Clara because that's what her mind has been trained to function as. Always a get out of jail free card. Always a way to get out of any situation that would cause her to not survive or to come out worse than how she needed to come out, right? So when she's saying that, we can also see later on when Edward and Esther are talking, and she says, you are supposed to ruin her. And basically she says that. And Edward says something along the lines of, yeah, well, she's harder to do that to than you would think. And so right there we see that was his intention. So Clara was not exactly lying. She did have to do something she didn't want to do to avoid doing something that was more completely overthrowing her. Obviously, we see later on in the episode where they destroy the will, which is episode 6. Yes? Yeah, episode 6. We see that she is willing to take that extra step. But I think here, she was still trying to make the ploy for, maybe there could be a relationship here where we could either work together to get the money, or I still have this way that I can blackmail him and say, no one's going to believe that I did this to you, kind of thing. So I think that she was working that angle still a little bit at this point in time, because they are spending a lot of alone time together, but we don't know exactly how long Edward and Clara have been having these private moments. We don't know how long. I don't think we know how long Clara has been there outside of, I think they say these past few weeks, maybe they say. So we're not really given a timeline for how long they've known each other. But I think it's clear that at that moment, she is still trying to see what options she has, still trying to see what angle is best. Again, not because she's a villain, but because that is what she has been taught and trained to do by everyone in her life, that this is what you have to do to survive. There comes a point, and I had talked to I have a Christian counselor that I go to, and one thing that when I first started to go see him, one thing that I had talked about with the sexual assault that I had experienced from boyfriends, and it was like every boyfriend I had was like this. And I had actually said to my counselor, well, at some point I just started thinking that this was just my lot in life, that this was what happened to girls. And I understand now that that's not an accurate thing, but I think that's what Clara was trained to believe, that this is just how men are. This is just what women of my station need to do in order to survive and get above it. And I think she was actually a little surprised that Charlotte didn't have a full understanding of what Clara was saying. Because Clara was trying to be delicate, trying to hint. Obviously they're in a ballroom, so that's why. But you could catch a bit of surprise on her face, and I do think it was genuine when she was talking to Charlotte about that, because I think that she is more inclined to be kinder to women who are kind to her, because what ulterior motive could a woman have with her? But when a man is kind to her, it's an advantage or it's a disadvantage. There is no real kindness from a man to her. And you can see that even with Crow, right? Because at that moment, Crow comes up and he says something. He's like, hey, let's dance. And she's like, yes, I'd be delighted to. She went from very serious conversation with Charlotte to, oh, I'd be delighted to. Men are her way to either advance, or men are trying to take advantage of her. So that's always her guard. But with Charlotte, she genuinely seemed surprised that Charlotte didn't know what she was talking about. So I think that there was a part of her that expected other women who were of her station were going through the same thing she was. That's just how women were treated. Now, I don't believe Clara is a gentleman's daughter. But even though Charlotte is a gentleman's daughter, Charlotte doesn't have money. So there is the same kind of standard, I think, for Clara, is that, well, I don't have money and she doesn't have money. And that's kind of her catch-all. Esther doesn't have money, so Esther automatically understands. And I think Clara came into it thinking Esther knows what I've been through, but not really fully understanding that it's also Edward who's abusing Esther, right? She doesn't get that at first. But with Edward, he also has an ulterior motive. He's clearly trying to take her out of the running for the inheritance. He's clearly trying to ruin her reputation and ruin her, period. That's his goal. That's why he starts this thing with Clara, because honestly, he's a narcissist. He's an abuser. He doesn't care about anybody but himself. He doesn't actually care for Clara. He doesn't actually want to be with Clara. He wants what she will give him because he wants to satisfy his own needs and urges. Well, they're not really needs. They're just urges. He wants to satisfy those urges, but he also wants to ensure that he is the only one who will benefit from what they're all fighting for, right? And that's his whole thing. And so while he he tells Esther that he's embarrassed by it. I doubt he's embarrassed by that. He didn't seem to be embarrassed by that when it was happening. So he's trying, he plays every angle, and he thinks he's so good at it. And to be honest, Esther buys into it. Clara doesn't, because Clara has already been through way more than Edward could put her through. And that scene, oh my gosh, that scene where she burns herself on the water heater, and Esther digs her claws in. I hate watching her do that. I hate watching her do that. But Clara says, you have no, and this is making me emotional. Clara says, you have no idea what I had to endure to come here, oh my gosh, how did she say it? No, I need to know how she said it. You have no idea what I've endured to get here, and you have no idea how much I'm willing to endure to ensure I stay. Because her previous life was so terrible and degrading and painful and abusive and destructive that she would literally be willing to harm her body. That burn was terrible. That was a really bad burn. She's willing to maim herself just to ensure she stays. And it's at that moment that Esther's like, oh, right? And so you see the look on Esther's face as she looks at Clara's determination, as she looks at, there's a fire in Clara's eyes, and that is complete credit to Lily. There is just this intense burning in Clara's eyes that says, I will not be forced to go back to what is killing me. I will either die here trying to stay here, or I will die before I go back. But I'm not going back there. And I think Esther almost understood why Clara was the way she was, but at the same time, Clara was destroying the things that they wanted in their life. What Esther thought she needed to be free with Edward. And Clara was using Edward to do what she thought she had to do to be free of Edward. So they're both Esther's trying to be free with Edward, and Clara's trying to be free of Edward. Or keep him, whatever sort of advantage, right? Either way, she thinks she can control Edward. Esther kind of wants to be controlled by Edward, meaning that, he's her husband, he can, be her husband. But then she goes back and tells Edward that she's a rat and all these things. And she's not wrong, but she's got the wrong reason why. The other thing that I think, and that's in episode 2, that really defines who Clara is and why she is the way she is when she looks at Esther and says, we should not be enemies. We shouldn't be enemies. And Esther says, how can we not when we're fighting for the same thing? And Clara very intuitively, although she doesn't fully understand why. I think she might think it's a little bit that Edward is her brother and she wants to save Edward from that, kind of, and pull her away. And also that, if I keep Edward with me, then when Edward gets the inheritance, I'll get the money. I think that's kind of what Clara's thinking, Esther's thinking, because there is a full shock when Esther sees Edward and Esther intimate, or when Clara sees Edward and Esther intimate, right? There's a big shock. So I think at this point, episode 2, she's thinking that Esther's head is at, I need my brother to provide for me, so when he gets the inheritance, he's going to provide for me, and also, I need to pull him away from your clutches. So when she says that, and Clara says, money, Esther says, of course, what else? And Clara has a very annoying look on her face. So she knows the fight is about Edward, but she doesn't understand why yet. So Clara is an incredibly smart and really, like Babington, very intuitive, and she searches for those moments of meaning. She really does a great job at that, and she really, she looks at a person because she's always trying to find that angle. She's always trying to find what their goal is so that she can decide if she needs to go against them or stand behind them. She's very strategic, and everything she looks at is a way to survive or not survive. It's that black and white for Clara. At least as I see it, it's that black and white for Clara. So they go on, and in that episode 3, when she burns her arm, her and Edward have this talk, right? And I think Edward genuinely thinks he can declare all of his plans to her. And because he's Edward, because look at me, who would deny me anything? I'm handsome, I'm smart, I'm a lord, I am a catch, everyone should bow to me. I genuinely think that's how Edward thinks he is. And so I think it's almost like if he confesses everything he's planning to Clara, she's going to back off because You can't defeat me, I'm great, kind of thing. So when he's sitting there with Clara, and he's saying, I don't think I care for my aunt's furnishings. I think I'll go with a different scheme when I inherit this house. And she says, if you inherit. And that whole conversation was, the whole point of that obviously was so that Esther could talk to Lady Denham about how long Clara has stayed and what a charity it is. Obviously that's the point of Edward pulling her away. But Edward delights in telling her, I'm going to win. And you're just going to watch me take this win. That's basically what he's doing, because Edward is a narcissist. Edward truly thinks he's that great and that good. So they're almost like this. I don't want to say they're a good match, because I think that Clara is good at its core. I think it's just hidden under years of abuse and neglect and depravity by means of survival. So I don't think that they are a good match yet. I think that if Edward could be redeemed, he and Clara would be a good fit, because they have the same intellect. They're both incredibly smart. They both know when the tide is turning. Like Edward, when Esther came back and she said, were you walking with him? You know I was. And then I think she told him about the marriage proposal, and she said, he makes me laugh, and I forgot about that. It was that moment that Edward's like, okay, all right, so you're about to say yes to this guy. I got to change this right now. And that's why he kissed her. Okay? With Clara, she did the same thing in every moment of the show. When she found Edward and Esther sort of embracing and Edward kissing her on the neck in episode 4? I believe it was episode 4 when that happened, right? That was when Lady Denham called them back to their house to talk about their potential new people. She found her advantage, and she saw how the tide could be turned in her favor. So she went with that. So Edward and Clara are both very, very good at knowing when something is about to go south and when something is about to be a good fit for them and something that will pull them out of whatever mess they're in or give them what they want. And they both go in that direction accordingly. I think that they're both pretty self-serving. Clara by necessity, Edward because he's Edward and he thinks he deserves it all. And honestly, I think Clara just wants to survive. I think she wants to survive in conditions that wouldn't kill somebody with the amount of disease and malnourishment and financial distress would kill her. I think that she just wants to survive. And that would require a little bit of money, so she's not living in the slums, so she's not living with rats, so she has food to put on the table, so she has clothing. So I don't think she wants really the high life. She didn't make a play for Babington, who has money. She went for Crow because he was more jovial, and I think Crow's Crow's inclination to seek out her was good. So she could have sought out Babington, but she didn't. She went with Crow because Crow, I think, was more easily manipulated. She knew that Crow was the type of person who she could use her wiles on, and he would do what she wanted. So she is looking for a way to survive. Edward is looking for a way to be rich. I mean, there are other things he could have done, right, to get money. Of course, it's limited, but there are other things he could have done to get money. And he didn't care to do that. He wanted to do the easy way. It was his. People should bow to him. And so I love how Clara calls them out, and Edward just doesn't care. He's not stupid, so he knows. But in that scene when they're at Lady Denham's house, and Clara, this is why it's hard, because Edward says some funny things, and they really make me laugh. When she says to Esther something I'm going to paraphrase, but something along the lines of, I thought maybe you thought that no man could compare to your brother, and Edward says, it's a fair point, I grant you. Yeah, it's so funny. It would be funnier if he was joking. And I don't think he will. I think that's something Jack Fox would say as a self-degrading joke. I don't think Jack Fox would ever say that meaningly. But I can see him saying it sarcastically. Like on our other podcast, it's like a joke that I'm incredibly arrogant because I'm right about everything all the time. I don't actually think that, which makes it a funnier joke. But I think Edward actually thinks that about himself. But because it's Jack Fox, we can look past that a little bit and we can find the humor in it because it's Jack Fox delivering that line. So there's that's one moment where you can kind of blur between actor, or we do, at least I do anyway, blur between actor and character. Because, I mean, Jack Fox is awesome. And the way he delivers that line is gold. I love it. But he's being serious. It's a fair point. How could anyone measure up to me? And Clara, you notice Clara does not directly attack him. Clara points it out to Esther because she knows by now what kind of man Edward is. Clara has understood that Edward is a narcissist, that Edward does think he's amazing and God's greatest gift. He thinks he is. So Clara does not try to embarrass him or shame him because he has no shame. Nothing he does is wrong. But she knows that at her core, Esther is good, and Esther does know that there is something to be shamed about in their relationship. And so as she says that, she just stares right at Esther with a big smile on her face, very proud of herself, and then calls Esther over to the piano. Esther's making jokes about Edward, and I think she's trying to push it to see if Esther feels shame because it shouldn't be happening. And I think that's what she thinks at this point, that Esther feels shame that it's happening at all. And I think that Clara, because she's never had healthy responses, and from what I can tell from what she said, she's never had a healthy home. She's never had an example of how to healthily respond to something like this. So it's almost like she has been taught that the way to get the truth out of someone is to almost beat it out of them, metaphorically. And with Esther, I think it's just, she has to... With Esther, I think it's that she has to mentally beat her up to get it out of her. If I push her far enough, she'll confess. And that's a really unhealthy way to do it, but I think that's generally what she thinks is good and what is right. It's not accurate by any means, but I think that's where her headspace is. So when she goes outside is when because I think when Esther storms out, she's like, okay, I know now. This is for sure what it is. And when she goes outside, again, Clara is surprised because she says, it happened to me too, only for me it was an uncle. And Clara says, don't try to make this something disgusting or not good. And Clara's like, how can it not be? And then she says, do not tell me you're in love with him. So she was again caught off guard because these people in this town are not what she expects. What she expects is to have a male relative abusing someone who he was supposed to be the protector for, the provider of, and for this girl to be filled with shame and desire to get out. And I think the other reason that Clara brings this up too is because, yes, I think she does care about Esther. I think her and Esther could be good friends if Clara could find some healthy ways to deal with things, and if Clara could find ways to live and trust other people instead of just trying to survive by any means possible. I think her and Esther would get along because they both have the same intellect. And I think that her and Edward also have the same intellect, I think her heart is closer to Esther's heart than Edward's, because I don't think she's actually bad. And Esther's not bad, but Edward is. If that makes any sense. But I think that was twofold of going out there, is because I think she was trying to encourage her, hey, you don't have to deal with him. You don't have to be a part of this. You can go. You can leave. That's what I did. I got out. I think that's probably where that conversation would have led. Is there no other relative you could stay with? Look at me. I went with my aunt. Aunt. I say aunt, but I said aunt because that's how she says it, and it felt weird coming out of my mouth. I'm a Midwesterner in the U.S., so aunt is how we say it. And I know that the proper way is probably aunt because it's AU. Anyway, I think that's probably where she would have gone with that, and that would be twofold. One, it would be saving Esther from a situation that nearly killed Clara. But also, it's getting Esther out of the way. So again, everything Clara does is double-sided. She does have a heart. She cares for these people because she's a human being who's not stone cold. But at the other, she always has to have some way that through every single situation, she is surviving. There is a means to survival in everything that she does. And I think that's what happened there. I think that it was her saying, yes, she shouldn't have to deal with this. Esther shouldn't be in this situation. I personally know how terrible that is. I wouldn't want anyone else to be in that situation. But also, if she's gone, this could really benefit me. So I think that she's thinking both things at the same time, which is possible. in our other group, in our fandom family chats, we talk about the Vampire Diaries. And one thing that one of the characters in there says, that's about two brothers and who do you actually love? This one character says, it's okay to love them both. And I think that's how Clara's mind is all the time. I think her mind is always, I want to help people. I care about people. But also at the same time, how can I take advantage of this situation to help me? So I think those two things are always going. It's always a revolving door with both of those things operating in every situation. And with Edward, I think that he's just me all the time. So he and Clara find each other to be a mutually beneficial, at least for the time. I think they both think, hey, I'm getting advantage of you. Hey, let's use each other. And I think that at some point they come to sort of an understanding, and I think that's around episode 6 when they find the will. I think that, is it episode 6? 5 is Cricket. Yeah, it's episode 6, because episode 5, Lady Denham gets sick. So episode 6 is when Lady Denham gets sick. Or episode 7. Jeez. Episode 7 starts off where they walk into they're saying goodbye to Lady Denham. That's where episode 6 starts. So, or episode 7, I mean. So it must be episode 7 when they find the will. By the way, you know what I'm talking about. I'm just trying to remember if 6 is solidly London and the ball and looking for Georgiana, or if there's some Sanditon mix in there. It's running together in my head. Anyway, when they find the will, I think that Edward thinks, I'm just going to use her to help me find this. Because when she produces it, I think he thinks, oh, she's gonna do what I need her to do. I'll just use my wiles. I'll just be the man. And it's proven when he says, when she's like, they're talking about burning it. They're talking about destroying it. How does she word that? She says something along the lines of, but what will I get? What will you get? You'll get nothing, because it'll fall to me if we destroy it. And that's at that point when she says, I'll go right now, and there's a room full of nurses and staff that I can go confess everything to right now. And he says, she wouldn't dare. And she says, I have nothing to lose. And that moment, Edward's like, okay. So let's try to use my physicality to overwhelm you with this. And so he says, I'll give you 1,000 pounds. That's like nothing. That's nothing. And so he's that arrogant that he thinks that just being him and her being a woman and her being Clara of all people, that he can just speak and she'll bow down. He can just say what he wants and she's going to succumb, because that's how good he is at what he does. Not accurate, but that's what he thinks, right? And so at that point, Clara is obviously thinking there's a mutual benefit here, because I think Clara's a little smarter than Edward. She's looking at every angle as she's been taught to do. And I don't think any one person taught her that. I think her brain has been trained that you have to look for every way out. You have to look for every way that can help you, that can give you an advantage. That's all you can do. And Edward just thinks, my wiles will get me through. My lovability and my charisma will get me through anything, because I'm awesome. And I just had a vision of him doing that little dance in episode 1. I love that dance. See, I like when Edward's on screen. Jack Fox, you make me very confused. You shouldn't be awesome in real life, because then I could really dislike your character fully. Because now I'm conflicted that I like a narcissist. Knowing you like a narcissist. Because you're not, but he is. Anyway, so I think that in that scene where they're talking about that, I think that Clara also has come to understand that her body is a way to get advantage. That she can do, even that can be used as a stepping stone to get what she needs. And that's evident when, after they have sex on the floor of Lady Denham's place, of Sanditon House. Afterwards, she changes it from a fifth to a quarter share. And he says, you agreed to a fifth. Lady's prerogative to change her mind. And his response is, you have proved quite equivocally you are no lady. Equivocally is not the word he uses, but that's what I'm going with. And she says, what about Esther? Would she feel the same? So I think even before she slept with Edward, even before they did what they did, her mind was already working of, okay, if I do this, if I use my body as the weapon I know it can be, what are my advantages I can get from this? So she was real ready with that Esther answer. She had been studying it out ever since Esther had confessed that they love each other. If it were not for their name, because they're only related in blood, if it were not for having the same name, they would be, and then she stops. Clara figured the rest of that out because she's not an idiot, and just like we did, because we're not idiots either. So I think that even in that moment when she was sleeping with him, when she was giving herself over completely physically, she was thinking of another advantage she could pull from that. She was thinking of another way that she could use that to be a vehicle for further getting her goal. And so she upped it, right? Because she knows, hey, if I tell her, then you're done. If I tell her, you're going to lose this little thing you have in your pocket. Because I don't think Edward stopped and agreed to her quarter share because he cared that how Esther would look at him, because, oh, I love her, I can't lose her. I don't think that's what it was. I think it was, no, I need her. She is my fail-safe, because if I don't get that money, she'll get that money, because Claire's obviously not going to get that money. So Esther will get it if I don't get it, and I need her. Also, if she marries someone else, I need her to continue to give me more money. So I think that's the whole reason he wants to keep Esther in his pocket, and why he doesn't want Esther to think differently about him, because he wants to keep her in his clutches so that she can always be a plan B. She can always be a failsafe. He wants her to be his backup in every way, and that's why he wants to keep her, and that's why he agrees to the quarter share, right? But then when Clara tells Esther about what they've done, and she says, he agreed to give me half, the reason she ups right there is because she understands, okay, I'm telling someone else here who probably won't want to let everyone know that you and her had this inappropriate relationship. And because she loves you, she won't want you to have, because she loves you, she won't want you to be disinherited. But if you set her off, she might confess. And I can go and tell Lady Denham, if Lady Denham confronts Esther, Esther will give it up, because she says in the book, right, that she has too much of a conscience. So I think Clara, the reason she ups is because she knows that now she can go back to Edward and say, listen, Esther knows about you, and if you don't give me half a share, Lady Denham's also going to know. I'll tell her you took advantage of me. I'll tell her that you had your way with me and I tried to fight you off, and Esther will back it up, because Lady Denham will ask her if this happened, and Esther will say yes. I think that's why she upped it, because she understood how Edward works, and she understood what Edward would be afraid of, and she understood what Edward would want to fight against. And so she uses that, and of course, Esther, because she is a good person, confesses to Lady Denham, even though she thinks Lady Denham's on her deathbed. And I think it's interesting, and we talked about this in our last recap, but I think it's very interesting that when Lady Denham tells them to leave, Edward waits for Clara. And when she didn't come, he reaches out his hand and he grabs her hand to pull her out of the room. So I think that at this point he might be thinking a little bit that he has a match here, and that there is still some leeway for him to get some things he wants out of Clara. But then you see when he goes down to, when he's walking around the pier and Clara's down there. That conversation, I think, is a really great conversation when he says, look at you in your pathetic little bag. And she says, he said, does he say the defeated enemy retreats? And she says, I was never your enemy. And then he starts saying, look at you with your pathetic little bags. And then she says that she hasn't really lost anything, and that he's lost everything. She says that, yes, but I had nothing to lose, where you have literally lost everything. I lost nothing by this. And that right there is very telling of her, right? She's on her way back to London, and she understands that she came there with she came there with nothing, and she left with nothing. So what exactly went wrong? She got to live in a nice house for however long. She got to be fed well for however long. She was dressed well for however long. When's the last time any of that ever happened to her? She really lost. She did lose that, but she never really had it. She was in constant war trying to keep it, so she never really had it. She came and left with nothing. She lost nothing. And I love when Edward's like, I'm a gentleman. I have a title. I love how he says title, so I always say it like that. I wish, though, that they would have kept that scene in with, I understand that why they cut it, but I wish they would have kept that scene in with Crow asking where she's going, and she says London. She says she has no friends, and he's like, you do now, and then they got up and walked away together. I'm interested to see if they are going to bring the Crow-Clara storyline back in, or if they're going to go Clara-Edward. Because, I mean, there's a real chance that the baby they were looking for is Clara's. Whether it be Crow's baby, although he's not coming back, or Edward's baby, which I think is very likely. But I kind of hope that Edward is truly redeemed. Truly, truly redeemed. Like, this knocks the tar out of him, and he realizes, okay, what I've become is not who I need to be. Although I don't know, my only thing that's trumping me up on that, because I feel like he joined the militia based off of the behind the scenes photos and the things he's posted on his Instagram while they film. I feel like he might have joined the militia, but I don't know that would have really changed him. I think he still would have fought to get out. I think he still would have looked at all the angles, so I don't know that he would really be redeemed. I sort of hope for him to be redeemed, though, because I love Jack Fox and I like how he plays his character. And I want to not feel shame about liking Edward a little bit. But I'm wondering because if he and Clara are together, I would like Clara to actually have a situation where she doesn't have to fight for her life all the time. Where not everything she does has to be about survival. That's what I want for Clara. Because I firmly believe that if she didn't have to fight for survival, she wouldn't act as she did. I truly believe that if she had someone who genuinely cared for her the way Babington cared for Esther, she wouldn't look at all the angles anymore. I'm sure it would be a habit that would take a while to break, but the love and protection and care of another human being, I think, would break that down in her. And if Edward's not going to be reformed and he's not going to be redeemed, I don't want her to be with him. But on the other hand, I still really like the idea of them being together. I think they could match wits well. Maybe they'll just be friends. And he will come to her, and she'll try to redeem him once she gets the money, once she has a good marriage. Maybe that's what'll happen. I don't know. But that is my basic synopsis of Clara and Edward. They are toxic from the beginning because he's a narcissist and she's a survivalist by any means necessary. And I don't really think, the only thing there is, I don't really think she tramples over other people that much. I think that she does what she needs to do, but I think she still thinks about the people around her. So Clara's the better one in that match. Edward is just simply a cat, right? So I want to know what you think about Clara and Edward. Do you think that they're going to be together in seasons 2 and 3? Do you think they're endgame? Do you think that, no, they should both stop being together right now? Do you think the baby's Clara's? I want to know these things. Tell me these things. Talk to me about these things. You can email me at the.sanditonchronicles@gmail.com to tell me your thoughts on this, or you can reach out to me in our Facebook group, which is the Sanditon Chronicles Sanditon Family Fan Club. You can message me there, or you can put it on our wall, and you can have everyone participate in the discussion. Or you can catch me on Twitter, which is at SanditonThe, or search Sanditon Chronicles. Or you can find me on Instagram at the.sanditon.chronicles. Again, you can just search the Sanditon Chronicles. If you want to come on with me and talk with me so I don't have to talk for myself for an hour, I'd love to have you on. So please reach out to me if that's something you'd like to do. I do, like I said, I do have the schedule laid out from now until March, but because we had to take out interviews, we have a bunch of spots that are just basically free spots. So we can catch up, we can talk about things. We're going to be, after our recaps, we are going to start doing some fan ones, like fan chosen topics. And then after that, we're going to go into some fan fiction stuff. So reach out to me. Talk to me. Do you like what you're hearing? Do you want to see something different? What do you want to see on our channel? I am a fan. I started this because I want to talk about Sanditon, and I want to give you something that Sanditon left a hole in all of us, I think, and I want to be able to share that with you. I want to be able to cover that with you. I want to be able to talk about what we love with you, and this channel is for you as much as it is for me. So please reach out to me and tell me if there's something you don't like, something you'd rather see, if there's something that you don't agree with, whatever it is. Reach out to me and let me know. I'd like you to enjoy this podcast. And please, please, please remember to share and subscribe. Share this podcast, the whole channel, or share these episodes with people that you know, whether it's on your Facebook or your Twitter or whatever. And subscribe to it, because the more people we get to be downloading these videos, the better content I have the capability to bring to you. And for our 1-year celebration, we're hoping to do like this big shindig party with some swag given away and stuff like that. So check out that, or, subscribe so that you can check that out, because we really want to celebrate you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't even have this channel continue going. I'd probably just be talking in a room with a straitjacket. So thank you, and that's the way I want to thank you, is I want to be able to offer you something in return for watching our channel. We just started to, let me look it up here what the app is. You can also listen to us on, I don't remember the name of it, Good Pods. You can check us out there. We have a tip jar on there that you can donate to, or you can just look us up on there. The more you watch us there, the more we get shared with other people, so do that too. And we will see you next for Recap 8. And after that, we are talking Edward Denham. So Jack Fox, better listen to that one. Okay, guys. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.